I think what's really important and what can be used as a really powerful tool when it comes to environmental activism, right, is reframing this relationship that a lot of humans have with animals. Hi, my name is Jaylen Bastos. Most people just call me Jay.
And I use the pronouns they, them.
I identify as both pansexual and non-binary. I work as an urban wildlife ecologist. I essentially just study what animals do and why they do the things that they do, and more specifically, the social interactions that they get involved in within our shared sort of urban landscape. The most concerning, especially with urban spaces like Vancouver, but across municipalities across Canada, is this concept of boldness. So it's only really recently being studied, but essentially what's happening is we're inviting animals or attracting them into our urban spaces, right? And as a result, just the sheer amount of times that animals are able to interact with humans is going up. That's a product of urbanization. That's also a result of climate change. And so as a result, we're having an increase in non-lethal interactions between humans and wildlife. And while humans get a variety of different things from these actions, ultimately what wildlife take away from that is that I can now perform even riskier behavior or even bolder behavior, right, in order to get resources, to establish territory, to find new habitat, right, to raise my young. And so what people don't understand is that over time, we're actually creating more aggressive and more bolder populations of urban wildlife through the frequency of non-lethal human-wildlife interaction. And so who's gonna ultimately bear the brunt of that, of this increase of urban wildlife conflict? Well, it's the animals that are then going to be destroyed or killed as a result of this increase in risk. Yes, there are direct correlations between the severity and increase in human-wildlife interactions and racialized communities. The way in which urban development has happened, right, throughout history and specifically across Canada, is that our urban development and specifically the building up of urban green spaces predominantly serves higher income, predominantly white communities. Now let's kind of look at the other side of things, right? Our lower income, our racialized communities. These are sites where the housing infrastructure, right, the actual types of housing that we have built, right, is one where it paints a story of a densification of resources. So now we have this situation where communities that don't have a lot of access to green space are also serving as attractants for urban wildlife, right? So we're attracting them into these areas. And so you have this increase, right, in the potential for that type of conflict that we were mentioning earlier, right? Vehicle collisions or actually direct predation. And so looking at how our lower income and marginalized communities have been structured and recognizing the unequal distribution of green space specifically has really wide impacts when it comes to the changing behaviors that we're witnessing in populations of urban wildlife today. So there is a vilification of our lowest income and our racialized communities that happens, where it places the burden of these changing relationships with humans and wildlife that we share urban landscapes with, places the burden of that shift on these communities, right? It tells them, oh, well, y'all are living together, or you're dirty, you're not keeping your things clean, there's trash everywhere, these are attracting animals to these spaces, predominantly rodents, increasing the potential for disease and parasite transmission, right? We vilify the victims of climate change impacts, right? And that's what we also mean. We have to really recognize what are climate change impacts. Is increasing disease and parasite transmission in urban areas considered currently a climate change impact? No, because we don't have an intersectional approach when it comes to developing climate solutions or even environmental activism as a whole. I can't help to think of people like urban ecologists like Christopher Schell, who are really pushing for a reframing and a restructuring of what it is that we even consider environmental issues. Looking at housing inequality, housing infrastructure as a climate change and environmental issue, right? Looking at this unequitable distribution of green space as a climate change issue, right? And rectifying that by prioritizing these communities who are most impacted by climate change. I mean, one of the most meaningful ways that you can do that is cut the check, like employ people from the communities who are currently most impacted by the impacts of climate change, right? So that is our lowest income, our Black and Indigenous individuals, and specifically higher queer people from these communities as well. We are the only ones who have the lived experiences necessary to fill the information gaps that are rampant throughout scientific research, throughout the academic community, right? We are the only ones. Making sure that there's opportunity, direct opportunity, right, for people who are most impacted to be involved in the solutions and the problem solving, because currently that's not the case. Every instance of racial justice is climate justice. If you tie that thread, right, of colonialism to how Black bodies were even used to perpetuate, right, resource extraction, to this very problematic relationship with the land, right, this violent almost relationship with the land, right? And you have to recognize that every act, every solution that goes to remedying that past, remedying that history, will have a positive impact on the environment. One example would be the establishment or development of green infrastructure and green spaces in cities. We have done the research, and we know that access to natural spaces, to green spaces, has a tremendous benefit, not only on your mental health, but on your physical well-being. Like, we're talking like the ability to lower blood pressure, right? And so looking at that as a way of actually restoring, right, and actually addressing the legacy of trauma that my communities have had to experience and endure and carry into our environmental activism and environmental justice. So looking at ways in which we can be more intersectional across the board with urban ecology and just urban planning in general and urban development will be able to sort of highlight how climate solutions are going to be inherently racial justice solutions as well.